Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
Most people dream of being rich and famous with a happy family, a prestigious job, and a huge villa. Achieving these dreams needs patience and hard work. I'm not interested in the meaning or value of a job itself. The only thing I care about is the salary it pays. I want my dream job to pay a high salary. That's all I ask. My name is Raji, and I am 21 years old. I have had only one dream my whole life: to be rich and to have a prestigious, high paying job. It has been my dream since I was a boy because I don't want to waste my time in a low paying job. I searched the newspaper for jobs with a good salary, any kind of job. One day, I found a catchy advertisement: elderly companion needed. The caregiver salary was quite good, and it seemed like an easy job, so I went to the interview. The interview session made me feel a little uneasy. I tried to remain calm by focusing on that nice salary the job paid. The interviewer was an old man, who even introduced me to his sons. He said that I have to take care of their invalid father, feeding him, changing his bed sheets, and giving him his medications. They were about to show me a list of the job duties, but I interrupted them before they could finish their sales spiel. "I'll take it," I stated simply and directly. They stood there with their mouths opened and then shrugged their shoulders. Okay, I got the job. So I lived there with their father, I'll call him the old man, in his villa. I sometimes felt that there was someone else there with us, but maybe I was just seeing shadows. The man himself was somewhat queer. I would sometimes wake up to find him looking at me intently and smiling strangely. One early morning at like 3 a.m., I heard a noise and went to his room, only to find his bed empty. Strange. Then suddenly, I sensed someone behind me, and I turned around quickly to see him holding a knife. He tried to attack me, but I managed to fend him off and pushed him away. Then I dashed out of the villa. I never came back. I told myself I didn't want to die on my dream job. Failing at my first attempt to find my dream job didn't stop me from trying again. I soon found a new one, which was an assistant clothes designer. The salary was even better than the last job. I went to the interview, and the interviewer, the clothes designer himself, seemed a little odd. I couldn't discern his, her, its gender because it had long hair and a soft voice, but on balance, I decided to call it a man. I told myself that I shouldn't judge people from their appearance, so I started my new job as his assistant. I told him that I was enthusiastic about the job, but I got the heebie-jeebies when he suddenly took my hand in his and just held it while looking at me. Was this guy homosexual? I wondered. I decided to ignore his odd behavior. It's all about the salary, you know. I have to say that he was very good at his work, and I met a lot of celebrities while working in his workshop. One day, our workload was particularly heavy due to an international festival in town. I was tidying up a new dress when he suddenly put his hand on the small of my back and asked me if I want to lie down with him. That heebie-jeebies feeling suddenly returned, and I pushed him away and dashed out the door while shouting back, "I suspected you might try that from the beginning, but I ignored my premonitions. Bye!" He called after me and said that I didn't know what I was missing, but I shouted back that I would live without it. Back to the want ads to look for another dream job. I searched for a few months before coming upon another job as a coffee bean collector. The salary was even better than the last job, so I was perfectly happy with that. I went to the interview. This time, the interviewer seemed to be a normal, welcoming kind of guy. "I hope you are ready to take this job," he said. "I surely am. I'm enthusiastic about it," I said. He explained the job duties. I had to collect coffee beans, wash and clean them, and put them in sacks for transporting. He said that I had to sign a legal contract that I couldn't break or get out of before its end date. "I am totally ready," I said. "Where do I sign?" He smiled kindly and escorted me to his office. I signed the contract without even reading it. It's all about the salary, you know. I couldn't wait to start putting away that high salary so I could start getting rich. He led me to the work area. While walking, I was imagining gently picking those fragrant coffee beans in those sunny, wide open fields. Boy, was I surprised when we stopped where a small herd of elephants were standing idly, swinging their tails and trunks back and forth. Some laborers were standing beside them, knee-deep in elephant poop and hand-picking coffee beans out of it, and putting the beans into sacks. I turned back to look at the hiring interviewer. He was guffawing and said, "Sorry, pal, you signed the contract. Too late to back out now." Then he walked away, still laughing. Please, God, don't let this be my dream job.
I confess that I love money and fame. People envy me for it, or they did. I've been a prima donna since the day I was born. All girls dreamt of being me. My father helped my brother and I achieve all our dreams. But there was one fly in the ointment, and this is my story. My name is Amelia. I'm 17 years old. My father's a businessman. My mother came from a rich family, so we were quite wealthy, rolling in dough, one might say. My brother Arthur was handsome, older than me. He went to flight school. We lived a good life without a care in the world. We had everything: cell phones, clothes, cars, servants, opportunities to travel the globe. We wanted for nothing. The most important thing was our happiness. And so my story starts at the villa where I lived with my family. My father employed many servants to attend to our every need. Martha was our head servant. She was in her 40s, funny, smart. Arthur and I loved her. Oddly, we didn't view her as a servant because she took such good care of us. Mother didn't seem to like her for some reason and was always mistreating her. Father, however, adored Martha. Once I left my iPod in the garden, and I was going to get it. On my way to the garden, I passed by Father's office, so I decided to go and talk to him. He was at his desk, and Martha was standing next to him, crying. I figured it was because Mother had mistreated her again. Father saw me standing there, and he asked me why I was still awake, and I told him about my iPod. I didn't think much of it at the time. As time passed, Mother and Martha's disputes became more frequent every day. Father wasn't home a lot, but whenever he came home, he would always ask about Martha first. One time, when this happened, I noticed that Mother glared at Father. I couldn't understand why. Father was often away traveling for long periods of time. One of those times, I noticed that Martha was always tired because Mother was making her work very hard. Mother never let her relax. One day, after midnight, I went to Martha's room to check on her, and I was shocked to see that she looked different than I remembered. I asked if she was pregnant, and she said that she was, but that I shouldn't tell anyone, otherwise she'd get fired. I didn't understand why my parents would fire her for being pregnant. A few days later, we received some really horrible news. Father's plane had crashed, and there were no survivors. We were stunned. All of us were crying, but Martha was crying especially hard. Suddenly, Martha fainted, and we took her to the hospital. Our life had changed overnight. After the funeral, Father's lawyer called us about Father's will. He came to our home and met my mother, Arthur, me, and Martha, and 2 other servants. The lawyer began reading the will. He started with Mother's inheritance, then mine, then Arthur's, and then Martha's. He looked at Martha, cleared his throat, and said in a quiet voice, "Martha, the deceased has left you 10 million to raise your child." The lawyer read the last line of Father's will, which said, "Martha's child is mine." We all gasped, but Mother suddenly lost it. Enraged, she attacked Martha as the lawyer pulled Mother away from her. Arthur was holding his head in his hands, and I was shocked. I said to Martha, "How dare you? How dare you do this to us? This is our money. You don't deserve any of it." Then I spoke to the lawyer. "Please tell me this isn't true." He replied helplessly, "Unfortunately, it is." Arthur was glaring at Martha, and he said coldly, "Martha, you are going to die." Martha looked very frightened upon hearing this. That night, the other servants helped Martha sneak out of the house. Arthur came to my room that same night and told me that we had to kill Martha. He said he knew where she was, and that her 10 million belonged to us. At first, I was hesitant to get involved. I mean, that was murder, but in the end, I reluctantly agreed to help him. The next day we made a call and hired a hitman to rid us of that disaster. Later we received a call from him. He said that Martha was no longer a problem. We smirked in victory. A few days later, the lawyer came by again. Before he could tell us why he came, we beheld a miracle. Our recently said-to-be deceased father was walking behind him with a servant holding a child. Arthur and I stared at him in disbelief and shock. Then we looked at each other. Arthur's face had gone pale white as all the blood drained from his face. Father was livid and said to us in an accusing manner, "The moment you thought I was dead and that I left an inheritance for Martha, you immediately arranged to have her killed. I suspected you'd try something like this. It was pure luck that I got back when I did. I missed my flight that day, otherwise I would have been dead now. So fortunately I came back early enough for Martha to call me and tell me about your death threat. When I arrived at Martha's place, she was already dead, but I called 911, and they were able to save the child. Then I immediately called my lawyer to revise my will, to leave half of my inheritance to this child. I felt like I was in an endless nightmare. The police arrived and told us that the hired killer had been arrested and had confessed and told the police that Arthur and I were the ones who hired him to kill Martha. As the policeman was handcuffing us to take us away, I thought about the irony, how Martha was dead, how her newborn baby had survived and was now the richest child in the country, how Arthur and I were going to jail, and how one small fly in the ointment had caused our ultimate fall from grace. My name is Ginny. You can call me Bad Girl if you like. That's what the neighborhood kids called me. I have a long story to tell you. I was the eldest of 5 siblings. My mother died of illness, and my father was crippled in a car accident. He couldn't walk, and he had to use a wheelchair. Seeing my siblings suffer from hunger and poverty was a constant sight at home. My father was depressed. Our neighbors helped us a lot, but I was constantly worried what would happen if they ever stopped, so I decided to try and find a job. I knew it wouldn't be easy because I was only 15. Who'd want to hire a 15-year-old? Though I was apprehensive and lacking confidence, I made up my mind to get a job. I went to many places, clothing shops, flower shops, grocery stores. The answer was the same. We're not hiring at the moment. One day, feeling down, I was walking aimlessly with no destination in mind, when suddenly I found myself near a hospital. On an impulse, I entered. I saw a nurse, but she seemed too gloomy to talk, so I looked around and found another nurse who looked a bit kinder. She noticed me and asked if I needed any help. I told her that I was looking for a job. Any job. I'd even mop and clean. She felt sympathy for me and told me not to worry. Then she went into the manager's office. I was worried. Was I in trouble? A minute later, she called me in to meet the manager. He seemed very kind, and he quietly asked for my name. I told him it was Ginny. He told me that Martha, the kind nurse who was helping me, told him that I was looking for any job available. He said he had a job for me, but he was concerned that it might be a problem. I felt a pang of fear and asked what the problem was. He said that I would have to work night shifts. That was it? I felt so relieved. I immediately agreed, and he said that he liked my enthusiasm and that I could start tomorrow. I was so happy. I returned home quickly, hugged my siblings, and kissed my father's hands. I told them everything about my new job. My father looked at me sadly and said that I was too young to have to bear this responsibility. I told him that it was okay and that I could deal with it. When I went to work at the hospital every night, there was a gang of young kids who were always loitering around the neighborhood. I hoped they wouldn't bother me, but my hopes were in vain. They made fun of me every time I passed them. I never told my family about this, though. I began work as a cleaning lady, but due to my diligence and intelligence, I was able to learn a little bit about nursing. So, I was able to get promoted, first to nursing assistant, then to a nurse. My colleagues supported me a lot. Everything was almost perfect, except for the neighborhood gang that was always bothering me and calling me Ginny the Bad Girl. I wished they would just go away and leave me alone. Then, one day, a miracle happened. While I was working at the hospital, the neighborhood bullies came in, carrying their leader. He was badly injured. His whole body was covered in blood. They were shouting for someone to help them, and when they saw me, they pleaded with me to save him. I worked quickly with the other staff. His condition was serious. He had been in a terrible motorcycle accident. The staff and I worked feverishly to stabilize his condition and treat him. After stabilizing him, I was exhausted. Suddenly, I felt someone coming close. It was the gang. They apologized for making fun of me and asked me to forgive them. They said they didn't know that I worked at a hospital. I smiled and told them it was okay, and that I considered them to be my brothers and sisters. Another nurse went to them and told them that their friend was okay now. I was so happy that my problem was solved. They called me over to talk to their leader. He had tears in his eyes and told me that he was so sorry and asked me to forgive him. He was so sincere that I was moved. I gently asked him to be quiet and get some rest. As I was walking away, he called me and thanked me again. After that incident, the manager called me in and praised me for saving the patient's life that day. I was still a long way from achieving my dreams, but I had a good head start, and the neighborhood gang began calling me the Mercy Angel.